On to another exciting session with Line Dev. I'm Rahima Wasti, your host for today, and we're going to have a technical discussion with our co-founder of Line that is Mr. Philip Cutting, a seasoned expert in business strategy. Philip, it's great to have you here with us.
Thank you, dear. It's a pleasure, and I'm excited to jump into today's discussion.
Same here. Phil, let's start things off with market research. How can our audience conduct effective research to stay ahead of the curve?
Okay, great. Um, Conducting thorough market research is going to be the cornerstone of any successful business that you have, unless you're just so lucky that you don't need to worry about it. You can fall into success. Normally, it
Yeah.
looks like this, but there's a lot of strategy uh, that we have to develop, and doing a good round of research and looking at your market, understanding your customers and their needs, and building your brand and your values to compete in that environment based off of the known information, unknown things you can make assumptions and test on, and developing yourself in the present landscape. It's exciting, and it takes a lot of kind of
Definitely.
bravery to build that audience.
Yeah, that's definitely insightful. Phil, I'm curious, how do you suggest our audience navigate the vast amount of data available to them?
Okay, um, great question. So, with the abundance of data at our fingertips nowadays, it's crucial to focus on having quality metrics over quantity. With a large quantity of data, we can quickly become confused and lose track of what we're actually trying to solve. And with a lot of data, it's easy for us to make connections that aren't real.
Yeah.
Correlation over causation, right?
Yeah.
So what you want to do is look at the key metrics that align with your objectives, and target those around the demographics of your customers. For example, like purchasing behavior, lifestyle needs, locations, cultural trends in your particular demographics. And by doing this, you're going to be able to hone in on the relevant data points.
Definitely, that makes sense. And Phil, I couldn't agree more to that. To this, understanding our audience is key to delivering personalized experiences that drive engagement and loyalty. Moving on to the competitive analysis, how can business stay ahead of the competition in today's fast-paced landscape? What would you say?
Oh, competition, the fuel that keeps us going at night, right? Um, conducting like comprehensive surveys, doing interviews, uh, all these involve examining not only the direct competitors, but also looking at other verticals to see what we have access to and what's in existing data, and what's currently trends in horizontal markets. So this can kind of help us stay ahead when things are moving fast, or at least in the beginning.
Yeah.
And later on, you work on doing like SWOT analysis to identify strengths and weaknesses. And there's a lot of tools out there nowadays. We can even use ChatGPT to throw in some data, have it look for patterns for us, and to try to consolidate on the data points that are going to bring us value. So, but you have to, once you do that high level analysis and looking at the vectors, the horizontal markets, then you can start testing your thesis and modifying it as it goes. I'd like to consider like a scientific approach where you go with your best guess, your gut guess first, and then start evolving it from there. And always look for the better question.
Definitely. Yeah, those are some wise words, Phil. It's essential for business to continuously monitor the competitive landscape and adapt their strategies accordingly. So we're going to move on to our next section that will lead us to our final segment, focus on using data to inform development decisions. How can business leverage data to drive innovation and growth?
Okay, great. So data is the lifeblood of modern businesses. And by harnessing analytic tools and technologies, right, and uh, just pulling from the wealth of analytics that we can get nowadays, we can really start gaining insights into how our customers are using our products, what their expectations are, and looking at market trends. I like to use research platforms like Statista, right? And I like to use tools in my apps like Google Analytics, for example, Firebase Analytics, which is really just Google Analytics, and like Sentry. There's Hotjar, depending on what kind of platform you're on. Depending on the platform that you have, there is going to be some kind of system that lets you get more data and still protect your users' privacy, right? But to get more data so that you can make better decisions, and you can also integrate things like surveys and questionnaires. And there's a lot of companies that will, at key points of a transaction, once the money is done, try to get like a quick little question out of you or a little teaser something, or offer rewards for more detailed interactions. So I think it's important to look for those tools based off of what your industry is and what technology stacks, right, you're using. You can do the same thing if you're in like an ice cream shop, right?
Right.
There's just the technology stack available for that, such as a physical camera and a person with a pen and paper.
Definitely. Philip, in the era of information overload, how can business ensure that they are focusing on the most relevant data points during their market analysis?
Oh, that's so hard to do. It takes a lot of practice. I wish I had an easy answer for that. The just so the easiest thing to do is get carried away with your KPIs, right? And to start trying to track every data point. What you want to do, step back, look at the key principle that you're looking to measure, and get the as limited data set around that as possible, while collecting as much data on that to give you a span to work out offsetting data so it doesn't confuse you. There's a lot of anytime you do research or an app, there's always going to be outliers. There's going to be an API that is down at the moment. There's going to be something crazy that happens. The wind is going to flow, or the butterfly is going to cause a tsunami somewhere, right? So don't worry about the outliers. Just try to focus in on a few key data points and see what you can find from that. Now, you want to collect all the data you possibly can, right?
Yes.
But you want to focus in on certain data, keep your blinders on, and you'll start to see patterns as you spend some time on that. One of my favorite things to do is get a cup of tea or glass of wine while I'm spent my second hour looking at certain data points. After a certain while, you
That
just got to watch your eyes and try to look at it again from another angle.
Yeah, that definitely made sense. And we'll go on to our next question. That is, could you share some strategies for effectively segmenting diverse target audience to tailor marketing messages more effectively?
Okay. Um, So for me, it starts back at making sure you understand your business strategy. And if you've analyzed your business strategy well, you're going to have a good idea of who your target audience is. And from there, you naturally create a couple profiles, which you then like. So in the very beginning, right, when we do a business analysis, right, and your value proposition, we may create like 30 avatars, right? And
Yeah.
this is just like consider brainstorming. You want to throw away almost all, not throw them away, but pick out your 2 to 3 best ones. You should have one that's nailed down, your perfect avatar, right? This is your dream client, the one that's always amazing for you, right? You should know who this is, name him or her, right? And have this one. But I liked having 3 so that you get a good concept of your demographics, see what they have in common, and then look to see which ones you're trying to serve the most out of that those few avatars and focus on that one avatar. Maybe it's the one that's going to be the most profitable for you, or maybe the one that's the easiest to work with, or maybe you have key values that are going to help determine that. But that whole profiling of your avatar is probably the most important step, and everything else will come fairly organic after that. Once you know that, you can start honing in to the particular demographics of that. And you may go, like, if it's professional, you might go on to LinkedIn to start looking at that kind of demographic. If it's more customer based, right, general, maybe you're looking at YouTube or TikTok if it's younger demographics, right, and then start kind of honing in on the data from there. A lot of these systems will have marketing components that you can go in and drill down in. And I
Yeah.
don't know if I want you guys to, at this point, start creating these kind of marketing campaigns. But if you look at that data, you can see how the big guys out there break down the demographics and how people tend to fall into general sections. And this will help drive your focus if you feel like you're lacking direction.
Wise words, Philip. Data-driven strategies that empower business to make informed choices that drive tangible results. So from here, we're going to move on to our next question. That is, as privacy regulations become stricter, how can business balance the need for the data-driven insights with the importance of respecting consumer privacy and data protection?
Okay, super. So there's two parts to that. One part is you're collecting data specifically to support a client, right?
Yeah.
In this case, you need their name and you need their contact information and maybe their location, right? Especially if you're like a firefighter, right? But in general, if we're doing analytics, we don't need any data that's going to be traceable to a certain person that's going to make it so that we could target them, right? Now, my first feeling is it's when in your terms and services, you let everybody know what data you're collecting, like what's the extent of it, and just let it be very open. Let people decide if they want to use your app or not, or your service or not, and go from there. Most people are pretty okay with it, I think, until you start doing like weird things or targeting them in ways. And I think the messaging and the targeting that you do is more of an ethical concern than collecting data that's anonymous. So as long as you make it anonymous and doesn't aggregate back to a person very well, or at all, preferably, then I think this is the intent that a lot of people feel that's appropriate, right? Everybody knows you're collecting data about how apps are used, right? But they don't want it. What I think a general client doesn't want is to say, you're keeping this data and you're sharing the data out in the world that, yeah, Phil loves soccer and this particular candy bar and this kind of dog, right? Like, it's like, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, no, that's too specific, right? You don't need to be throwing that out in the world, right? But
Yeah.
if you know that here in Sofia, there's a group of users, 80% like King Charles, 30% like Labradors, 5% love cats, right? 3% would like to see cats cooked, for example, right? Don't like them, right, or whatever. So that's what people expect. So
Yeah.
I think follow the intent and realize you don't need to know that specific, right?
Yeah.
Now you might say, I want to know how many, blonde, green-eyed guys out there that are using my app within 30 miles of, this monument, right? And that's still cool. But I think when you start saying here's their names and addresses and phone numbers, that's when everybody's like, well, you just totally stepped away.
Yeah, definitely. You're totally right about that. So, what are some innovative approaches business can take to gather qualitative insights from their audience beyond traditional surveys and focus groups?
Okay, so I've already mentioned a few systems that allow you to track usage at a granular level. The After that, you a lot of people know about Facebook groups and to be able to use pixels and different ways to track demographics in a way that's respecting the privacy laws, but also allows them to get certain information on their user base. The some innovative ways also include simple things like polling, right?
Yeah.
Like including the ability for people to give feedback to split testing. Split testing is actually a very can be a very innovative way to get data
Yeah.
without having to ask for it, because you can see how people do things, and then you create, like, it's experiments, right? If you think of split test as really having in-person use cases, that's exactly what it is. So I like to do like 75-25 splits, right? 25% to do a test. Then I have the core kind of user group. Now I can get that to 50-50 if it's a less risky test, right? So if it's kind of like more innocent, minor test, and it's not going to have a negative business effect, 50-50. If there's a risk that it's going to be perceived poorly, or that it's going to cause loss to the business or loss to income and somehow affect the profit margin, then maybe I'd only release it at 5%. Try it, see how it is, and keep track of that. But split testing, I think, is a critical skill for getting real information that's close to that's almost so useful. It kind of feels like black hat, but it's not.
Definitely.
I think it's a very appropriate and ethical way to get data.
Perfect. Yeah, wise words. So we're gonna move on to our next segment that will connect us with our audience, and they have some questions for you.
Oh,
The first question which we are having is from our audience: what are some common pitfalls to avoid in market research?
common pitfalls. The first thing is not defining the objective that you're looking for. So the very first step is developing your thesis, and then you can outline what you expect to see. Then you look at the data to see
Yeah.
how it supported that. Another common mistake is a lot of people will present the answer they want,
Yeah.
and when they get that validation, they feel great, but they haven't really done a real test. They've spoon fed the audience the answer they're looking for, and people just gave it back to them either out of kindness, laziness, or just automatic response. So that's the second big thing. I think the third big mistake is confusing correlation with causation, and making sure you've thoroughly tested it, and that you go back and somehow do a verification, especially if it's important, right? A verification of what you're proving, and making sure that it is a correlation, so that when you start putting money into that it's really going to what you're looking for. And a lot of times, yeah, for marketing, we have to do quick tests. We have to give it enough time to be responsive, but we also want to make sure that we're chasing the right path. And it's funny because you may get what you want and lose track of the other factors, right? So you might be getting more users, but your income, your profit per user, it gets
Yeah.
reduced because you're bringing the wrong audience, or you're bringing an audience that's conflicting with your vision, and thus causing problems for your community. So you make sure
Definitely.
that you keep a good eye of your, and I guess that comes to the fourth thing, know your KPIs and keep tracking those.
That does happen a lot. These are actual common pitfalls that we face. So
Yep.
you put forth it in a pretty nice manner, and yes, that these are the things which we need to avoid. And the next question from our audience is: how do I determine the demographic characteristics of my target audience?
I think when you're creating your avatar, you should go right down into, is this person married, black, white, Asian, you name it, right? Give the person a culture, And a lot of times this comes from experience in in selling your products. Right now, if you're just creating the product in the very beginning, yeah, you have to go through and create your whole business model. You have to understand your key partners, your key activities, and the key resources. And by knowing these, you can start seeing who's probably going to be using your product. Look at other companies that are selling a similar product or service and see who their customers are. And if you still can't figure it out because it's too new, then just create a couple of avatars and start testing it with your marketing, target those and see who it is. One thing I like to do out there is to do a very general campaign where I know I want my audience to be, USA for example, right? And then see
Yeah.
who's responding to that and then further dive in. And this is a fair, kind of like a, not a black hat way to do it, but it's a very base way to get the detailed information about your demographics by seeing who's responding. And Facebook, Google, all these companies give you great insights on who's using your app. So you can see general incomes, ages, all kinds of data. That's some there's going to be data you wish you could have, but there's ethical concerns sometimes around that, so you may not be able to get that in obvious ways, but you can always just build your community around your product. And as you're doing this marketing, this general marketing, and start talking to people, you'll be able to realize who your demographics are, and sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about it. And then we're moving on to our next question that is from our audience. What role does user feedback play in market research?
Customers suck. No, we don't pay attention to them. Not kidding, right? Um, that's a terrible joke. So the every chance you have to get feedback from your customers, value that, right? Even if it's negative feedback, right? There's a lot of times you can get negative feedback, and if the person is upset enough to reach out to you about it, then it's good to listen to them. Right now, sometimes hard to, especially if they're mad, really mad, right? But reward them for speaking out, even negatively, right? Give feedback and apply things. And sometimes, like if you have a customer that leaves a bad review and says, "I want a refund and I hate you," right? One of the best things you can do is say, "Cool, look, here's a refund. Tell me what happened. Here's a couple coupons for your friends if you know anybody that wasn't interested in it. Thanks for trying this out. I really appreciate your time. I hope you find a better product out there. Keep an eye on us. We may make that better for you in the future." Or if they're not your target audience, make sure you learn how to work them out of the client base that you're attracting, right? So sometimes we attract the wrong clients in the first place, and getting this
Yeah.
feedback is super helpful in finding that out so that we can retarget our marketing.
Answers our question. What metrics should I prioritize in my market research data? That came from our audience.
Oh, that's so good question. What I do on that is because it's different, right? It's different for every client that I work with. I tie it back to your KPIs. What's gonna define a good customer for you? And once you have that defined, create a customer scoring card, right? And this card should say, this is what my ideal customer is from 1 to 5. 1 being terrible customer that I probably would just refund right away or even try to kick out of my funnel before we start. And 5 is the client that I want to marry, right? So maybe it's their income, right? Maybe it is their experience, or maybe it's their favorite color and where they are located or the size of their house, right? I don't know what that's going to be for your audience, but create that scoring card, and once you have that and your KPIs, it's a no-brainer.
All right. That answers our
That's
question in
a
pretty well mannered.
that's a non-answer, isn't it? It's like I escaped that question. Sorry.
It's fine. It is no. You actually answered the question in a pretty well manner. You gave us a lot of examples that, yes, that answered our question one way or another. Another question from the audience: how can I leverage market research to attract investors to my app?
Attracting investors is interesting. So generally, there's investors like to see data and results, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if when you're doing surveys or any kind of market research, you want to keep that journal, especially when you're doing interviews. Journalize all that. Make sure you're keeping this data long term, and that you are iterating over this, and that you've showing investors that you've developed a process and have this SOP, standard operating procedures, written out so that you can duplicate that in your business, and to have other people be able to do that. This goes back into how to create your business systems, but nothing looks better to an investor than solid business systems and a business that is getting results. So make sure you have your stories down. The stories, not your lies, right? But the story being the customer journey, how you guys do your business, how you present this, and from there you can create whatever path is going to go forward, and that's specific to each business. But the having that and showing that to investors is a big deal. Then it goes into having forecasts, good bookkeeping, showing that you have KPIs that you're approaching and you're addressing are big deals. These things like the scoring card that I talked about earlier, your KPIs, all these are metrics that you track and measure, and this gives investors confidence that you're just not winging things. And if you can also create the journey of where you plan to go, your inflection points, and show that whenever you're asking for money, that it's going to be used to get you to the next inflection point plus 5 to 20% leadway, so that they know that, and the purpose of that extra leadway is to get to raise the next round of capital. Having this process involved set up gives investors a lot of confidence, and of course having a great product that people can invest in is maybe the first thing.
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right about it. And another question from the audience is: how do I balance between innovative features and what the market wants?
Yeah, so it depends on your audience and what they're looking for. Now, if your audience is, the early start crowd, right? The early adapters, they want to see a lot of innovation. They want to see something stepping out of the new. They want to get that thrill, right? If that's your audience, yeah, you're probably thinking 80% innovation, 20% planned stuff that's just improvement. A lot of times people are looking for consistency though, right? If it's a mature market, a mature product, they want to get that thrill or that joy or that spike out of it, but they don't want to have different experiences as they go. So they're a little bit slower to innovate and to bring in changes. A lot of times, anytime you make a change, especially a visual or significant change in the way a process works or looks, you risk losing customers. So be careful on that. Now if you can bring in new customers faster than you're losing old ones, right? Because no matter what, we're always losing old customers, right? You're either growing or you're dying. So yeah, innovation is great, but balance it with the needs of your particular client base. And it all depends on the demographics of your current app.
Absolutely. And what techniques can we use to ensure the accuracy of market research data?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's not caring about the accuracy as much as the results that I'm getting, because I care more about if I'm achieving my KPIs than if my data is super perfect, right? I may be getting all the information I need from just 5 users, from 5 bits of data, but that they happen to be well spread out, right? Now, maybe I have to have 1,000 to really understand exactly what's going on, but is that as important is to be able to be flexible and quick versus to getting that perfect data. I'd say it's better to be flexible and quick to adjust. Remember how I said in the beginning, you maybe do 5, 10 split tests with 5, 10, or 50%, depending on the risk. This is part of that. So if you're looking to make a change that may affect you well or poorly, if it's hazardous, then use that smaller 5, 10 percentage. See how it affects the overall results of all your KPIs, probably profitability being a big one, right? And track that. Now, sometimes you have to do these in 90-day sprints, right? But sometimes you can get a real quick look at it. So if you say this is going to be a 90-day test, right? And in 5 hours, you're getting terrible results, pull the plug on that quick and reconsider it. Look at what was causing those. Now, it might just be you didn't get enough data in there and there's a couple random outliers, but don't be scared to stop a test if things aren't looking good.
Yeah, can't agree more with that. What are some effective ways to gather user needs and expectations? How can I use data to predict future trends in my app's niche?
Okay, super. There's every industry will first of all have its events, will have its journals, and have its sources of data collection that it does by its industry. See what industries you're related to, and get those publications and data first. That's something you should be subscribing to if you're a serious businessman or woman. Then what you want to do is to start building your experience so that it's really like learning how to see patterns, right? And this happens for most of us kind of slowly, and we develop this over time. And it starts off with gut feelings, and it evolves through testing and documentation into a process that you can replicate and to monitor. But in the very beginning, it comes with intuition until you learn to pick out those patterns. And if you're just an indie developer, this is hard to do in the beginning. So get all the information you can out there, get involved in discussion boards, right? Go into the communities that already exist and become active in those. And you'll learn to very quickly adapt and see the patterns just by talking to people. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with just asking questions in these communities or get involved in creating a community if there isn't one for you. It's pretty rare that you can't find a similar enough community to help get going, but it's not uncommon that you can create a community around your service or product or industry that's going to be really significant and help you drive that market itself. So don't be afraid to take a leadership role also.
All right, that answered our question pretty well. And there's another question from the audience, that is, how do I conduct market research on a limited budget?
Get out there and talk to people. Join the Facebook and Discord groups. There's Slack groups. There, see where the community is, and go there to where the community is for free. And then just go and start talking to people in those communities. This is the best place to start if you have a lot of money or if you have no money. Then get in with the leaders of those communities and ask to be able to put in a poll or a discussion board. Now, at some point, it's not hard to start your own community if you have a passion. If you're an advocate for your service, or if you really care about it, right, then it's not hard for you to create that community yourself. And then you can really, almost for free or all the way into $100, a few $100 a month, to be able to have that community that you own and manage. With Circle, for example, or on the paid version, School now is an up and coming thing. On the free side, you have Slack communities. Discord is almost easier on the free side, right? There's still, I think Yahoo's still a thing, even though I haven't looked at that for generations, right? Look where your market probably is and go there. And if there is no community there, start a YouTube channel and create a Discord channel.
Yeah, that will help us even in effective manner. And how important is it to adapt my app to different cultural contexts?
It can be very difficult. It depends on the needs and what you're providing. So you want to be very cautious about it when there is sensitivity around what you're doing. Now, if what you're doing isn't sensitive, doesn't have communities or group chats or inner places where things can quickly get out of hand, it's easier to manage. But if you're doing social platforms, right, or if you have components where people aggregate together or go to events, right, then you have to be super cautious on how people perceive you and how you're perceived. Sometimes it's even good to do press releases, right? Look at the existing communities out in the world, drive good news about yourself, and preempt negative news if you're becoming somebody that's worth hearing. And sometimes it's not bad to cause a little bit of conflict if you do it in a healthy way to get recognized. But as far as making sure that you're staying ahead of that and trying to be considerate of cultural differences, sometimes you just have to limit where your app or service is provided. And then you can slowly grow. And sometimes you even have to rebrand your product for certain markets so that you don't cross cultural values and still provide that value that you're looking to provide. And, yeah, sometimes you just can't do it in one app. You have to split it up.
Yeah. And how can social media analytics aid in the understanding the target audience for an app?
So it starts by having your dashboard and visualizing the data in a meaningful way. There's depending on the systems, a lot of them come preset up, or maybe you have to customize your dashboards. Google Analytics lets you have a lot of dashboards, but each one has a constrained set of data that you can pull on in there, metrics. So it really depends on what tools you have and what you're trying to do. But visualization is amazing. Using AI nowadays to help get that raw data and have it to give you information, and working through that with AI nowadays is a powerful tool to also learn how to see patterns and how to display them in meaningful ways, and also can help you see what you're missing. I need to make
Yeah.
a tool for that.
Yeah, and there's another question from my side that is, in the age of personalization, how can business effectively tailor their marketing strategies to individual customer preferences while still maintaining the scalability?
Actually, pretty easy to do now. Of course, you have a good onboarding process for your app. Get as much information that's immediately obvious and useful, while feeding back the purpose of this and the value of your app. Make sure you tie those together. Anytime you're asking for information, you should be presenting the value of giving that information. And if you can defer getting certain information later on, that's even better, right? So when people are interacting with the system, then you can say, okay, yeah, now you're looking for the best ice cream shop in this area. Okay, can I go ahead and use mapping? Okay, cool. Now I can see where you're at, right? Cool. Now I can see the places that you're going to. Now I start to see more about you. You're providing to me detailed information through the use of the app, rather than saying, hey, do you like ice cream? Are you interested in all this? You can avoid a lot of steps by just watching what they do and working in randomizing feeds and information to see how they respond to that. And then you can always provide quick, hey, do you want to do this little survey, or create feedback loops that allow your users to, when they're ready, give you more information, or to go back and update their profile. But always show what it's for them, and that makes it easier for them to swallow and for you to get better and accurate results.
All right. Philip, what are some innovative approaches business can take to gather qualitative insights from the audience beyond traditional surveys and focus groups?
Okay. So we've already mentioned a few obvious ones. The one I just mentioned is by split testing, and now but you're taking a step further by seeing how people interact with your app, right? The next step in that is to look for false negatives by putting in random information and see if they take the bait, to see how long that stays on the screen, see if they're interacting with it, entice them, tease them, flirt with them, right? And
Okay.
by giving them what they're looking for, and seeing what's on the edge cases on how far that is. Don't think so narrowly that you're like, okay, cool, people like ice cream, this guy likes ice cream and puppies, right? Because I know he went to the pet shop and he went to the ice cream shop for a while, right? But they may also like cats, and they may also like Circus Delay, right? And you kind of feeding things inside there around it by introducing content or paths for them to take, and pay attention to those paths. It's a more advanced form of split testing that's done data driven rather than systemized.
All right. And Phil, what are the most cost-effective methods for conducting market research?
Nice shirt, clipboard, go out there. Don't pretend to be the CEO of the company, but be somebody who's getting information for the company so that people don't feel pressured to give you overly positive information, and making sure that you're going out and letting them lead the discussion, open-ended questions, get on community boards. That's an even cheaper way. And interviews, I think, are the step you do before you start doing surveys anyways. But it's not hard to go out there and to start asking questions. So go into a parking lot, right? And, on the way out, ask customers questions. Sometimes, offer apples or some samples of something and talk to the people, get their responses, right? Ask family and friends about stuff. Just have that conversation. Dinner conversation is a great place to get an initial feel for what you think, because a lot of times your family will tell it to you straight, right?
Yeah, that makes a
So
lot more.
don't be afraid to ask the family, even if you're not going to ask them for feedback or to become part of the project. Just have it as part of the discussion. And another free thing is go make some friends, right? Hard to do sometimes, but go make some friends out there that are interested in that and see what they think.
All right. And with the shift towards remote work and digital interactions, how can businesses adapt the market analysis strategies to account for changes in consumer behavior and preferences?
This is hard to do, and we already talked about using general marketing approaches to get to uncover or to dig up patterns within your buy-in audience. And once you've started that, you can start to create those micro visions of what people are looking for. And when you have the more information you have, once you start building those avatars, you can go into like ChatGPT, say, hey, here's the basic information I have, here's my product, and have it engage back with you and critique your processes to help you refine it. And then it's about repetition.
All right, all right. And how can I segment my target audience for more effective analysis?
That's a really hard thing to do. Sometimes it's less about intentionally segmenting and more about throwing out general information and seeing how people respond, and then taking those who do respond and putting them into certain groups. If you have a mailer, for example, right, then people who respond to certain content, you put them into a certain bucket, and now you have a demographic of people that are both interested and engaging, and from there you can kind of dive into who they are. There's different systems out there you can use to find out more about those specific people, right? And see who stands up, see who volunteers, right? And start asking them specific questions to how to serve them better and to get to know them. And when you do it as a customer driven methodology, you're going to find that people are generally supportive because you're looking to give them value. And as long as you're giving them value, you'll fall into discovering those demographics and segments.
Right. So here you answered a lot of our questions. You literally cleared a lot of our concepts. So, well, folks, that concludes our discussion on mastering market dynamics. A big thank you to our co-founder Philip Cutting for sharing his invaluable insights and expertise. Remember, success in today's digital world requires a strategic approach to market and audience analysis. Until next time, stay curious and keep innovating. Philip, do you have to say anything to the audience?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to my audience. Thank you, you dear. And guys, remember this is a journey, and it starts with one step at a time. Some of those steps are going to be backwards, but keep adapting, keep learning, be brave, strive for excellence, keep it data driven, keep records, and always learn and conquer the next stage. Don't jump back in fear. Never let somebody bite you, guys. Be brave and go out there and rock.
Thank you so much for your time, Phil. Take care of yourself. God bless you.
Thank you, dear. God bless you.